Turkey is an adversary that's operating inside NATO. They weren't that way when they joined NATO. It's just that when Erdoğan took over, he's straight up Muslim Brotherhood and has turned Turkey into an extremist Islamic state. And I don't think that we should be allies with extremist Muslim states. And I think that the thing with President Trump and Erdoğan is that Erdoğan understands that the way to President Trump's heart is to stroke his ego.
Chuck Holton is a former U.S. Army Ranger and veteran war correspondent who has reported from more than 100 countries. When Chuck joined us several months ago, he warned that Iran would spread instability, pressure President Trump, and try to survive by convincing America to stop before achieving victory. Today, many of those warnings appear to be coming true. New reports say Israeli intelligence warned the United States about an Iranian plot to assassinate President Trump in Turkey, reportedly forcing the Secret Service to secretly move him off Air Force One. Today, we'll examine that alleged plot and much more. Chuck, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Chuck, Israeli intelligence reportedly warned the United States that Iran planned to shoot down President Trump's aircraft in Turkey. Can you take us inside what reportedly happened?
So I guess there was a credible threat of a surface-to-air missile attack that was being planned by the IRGC against President Trump's plane. And so when it first came out, it was the story was that President Trump had chosen to fly on the older Air Force One because the newer Air Force One, the Qatari one, had been sent to the UK for some sort of morale building trip so that troops up there could tour the plane. Then it changed to, well, actually, he took the old Air Force One because there was a threat and the new Air Force One might not have had all of the countermeasures that they wanted to counter that threat. So they decided to put him on the old one. Well, now it's come out in recent days that President Trump didn't actually fly on the old one either. He got on the old one along with the press and Marco Rubio and a bunch of other people, aides and things like that. And then he and a very small group of aides walked right through the plane and got on the sandwich cart, that thing that delivers the food to the plane, and then rode in the back of a box van over to another U.S. government plane that was off on the tarmac, much smaller plane, and flew on that plane from there to Mildenhall, where he picked up the Qatari plane and went home. All of that is, again, due to this credible threat from Israel. I mean, the threat's not from Israel, but the information came from Israel that a surface-to-air, like shoulder-launched missile might be shot at the plane. Today, we heard that there was actually a threat to President Trump when he was in his hotel in Ankara, that there was a plot to fire an RPG into his hotel room. They knew which floor he was on. They knew which side he was on, and they were going to fire him. And the report says that a man carrying a RPG launcher was seen wandering around the area. I think maybe we ought to look into that a little further. Why didn't somebody tackle that guy? But yeah, so this story continues to sort of evolve as we get more information. There's some criticism against the Trump administration for getting off the plane because it was too dangerous, but then leaving the journalists and Marco Rubio on the plane without him, things like that. But I think President Trump's been asked about it, and he said actually they believed that it was more dangerous on the plane he was on, which then begs the question, why was he on that plane? I don't know. And why didn't he go to a different airport or something? I don't know.
Now, reports suggest that Iran possessed extremely specific information about Trump's movements. Now, where could that intelligence have come from? Could Iran realistically organize an operation like this on Turkish soil without Turkish, security services detecting it?
I think that's the question we need to be asking right now. And I think it shows that we cannot trust Turkey, which anybody with 3 brain cells to rub together already knew that. But if this is happening and it's happening in Ankara, then we've got to be looking into what did Turkey know and when did they know it.
Now, Turkey is a NATO ally that hosts American forces, while Erdogan's government is increasingly hostile towards Israel. What is Turkey today? Is it an ally, a transactional partner, or an adversary operating from inside NATO?
Turkey is an adversary that's operating inside NATO. They weren't that way when they joined NATO. It's just that when Erdoğan took over, he's straight up Muslim Brotherhood and has turned Turkey into an extremist Islamic state. And I don't think that we should be allies with extremist Muslim states. That's just me personally. But they have continued to be transactional with the Trump administration. And I think that the thing with President Trump and Erdoğan is that Erdoğan knows how to stroke Trump's ego, and that's the way to his heart. So he likes Erdoğan, and when he showed up over there in Ankara, they had this big celebration or big ceremony planned with the military and pass and review and all that sort of thing. They didn't do that for any of the other leaders that showed up in Ankara. There were leaders of more than 60 different countries that were there. And only President Trump got that red carpet welcome. Why is that? Because Erdoğan understands that the way to President Trump's heart is to stroke his ego.
Turkey has accused Israel of sabotaging peace efforts with Iran. Is Erdoğan still behaving as a mediator, or do you think he's increasingly advancing Tehran's position here?
Well, I think it's plain for anybody to see that there is no there's no peace negotiations with Iran. They are saying it themselves. If you just look at what the Iranians are saying, what the IRGC is saying, we're not going to make any deals. We want total control over the Strait of Hormuz, and we're going to keep our nuclear program. They're not moving on those demands at all. So what negotiations? I mean, the two negotiating sides are so far apart they can't even see each other. So that's not a negotiation. So Turkey is, of course, Erdoğan never misses a chance to bash Israel. And he's definitely probably the biggest threat militarily to Israel. Although if Turkey and Israel went to war, Turkey would lose. I have no doubt about that. But he doesn't have designs on Israel just yet. I think Erdoğan's designs are on Syria. He wants to basically annex Syria, and he's already done that to parts of it. Drive out the Kurds, drive out the Christians, drive out the Druze, and, just own it. Of course, Israel is not going to go for that either. That's part of the reason why they're saying they're going to stay in southern Syria for the indefinite future.
I want to ask you about something that happened a couple of weeks ago. Why does Zoran Mamdani demand handcuffs for Netanyahu while a senior official in his administration was preparing to meet with an Iranian ambassador?
Because he's anti-American, self-hating communist, not to put too fine a point on it. Mamdani is, I guess the only word you can use for somebody like that is depraved. I'm a Christian. I believe the Bible says that when people deny God, that he gives them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not be done. And they will believe that evil is good and good is evil. And I don't see how you can otherwise explain Mamdani's actions and beliefs than to say he's just depraved.
And when we last spoke, you warned that Iran would create enough global pressure to convince President Trump to stop before achieving victory. Do you think that prediction is now coming true?
I think it is. President Trump has kind of been painted into a corner here, and Iran is not backing down one bit. So I just spoke with an Iranian dissident a few minutes ago, and he was telling me that, the thing about the IRGC is like, it doesn't matter how much we bomb them. They don't care. They are uncivilized cavemen for all intents and purposes, and they would happily live in holes in the side of a mountain somewhere for the rest of their lives as long as they could control and keep power. So striking all their infrastructure is only going to make the lives of the Iranian people worse, and the hardliners that are going to fight to the death, they could care less. They see this as an existential struggle for their belief system, their holy war, and that's the thing that will only end in their elimination.
Now, last time you described three possible outcomes. You said we degrade Iran's military, reopen Hormuz, and remove the regime. Now, of course, we have degraded their military, but the other two, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's appearing that, and I've been talking about this a lot lately, President Trump keeps saying that the Strait of Hormuz is open. It's open for anybody who wants to go through. But Iran doesn't have to have a navy or an air force to close the Strait of Hormuz. They just have to threaten to blow up ships and maybe lob a drone at a ship once in a while to show that they're serious. And then the insurance companies will close the Strait of Hormuz for them. So by holding the value of those ships hostage, weaponizing that against President Trump, the Iranians have struck on a strategy that is working very well for them. Now here's the thing that I don't understand. President Trump put out a tweet several weeks ago that said, for every ship that Iran targets in the Strait of Hormuz, we will blow up one bridge or power plant in Iran. And since then, Iran has blown up at least 10 ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States has not responded. So I mean, are we going to be people of our word or what? If we're not going to make good on our threats, then we just make ourselves look weak. And we definitely need to stand up. And if we're going to say it, we better do it. Otherwise, shouldn't say it.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about a different topic. Prime Minister Netanyahu wants Israel to reduce American military aid, potentially to zero within 10 years. Is that realistic? And has Israel's dependence on America become a strategic vulnerability?
No, I don't think it's become a strategic vulnerability. I just think that it's always a good idea for countries to take steps not to become dependent. Dependency is something that is often seen whether you're talking about giving charity. If there's a guy on the street corner that's homeless and you give him $10 every time you drive by there, he's going to stay there. He's going to stay homeless. You're going to actually make that a self-fulfilling prophecy by making him dependent on you. And then if you move or go away and stop giving him money, then he'll be even worse off than he was before. So we saw that in Afghanistan. We saw it in Iraq, where we had pumped so much money into those countries and then we just up and left. And they all but collapsed. I mean, really struggled without that. At least on the part of Afghanistan, Joe Biden was kind enough to lead them $86 billion worth of military hardware, which they could then sell to other countries and use for the oppression of their own people. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to Israel, the United States gets more, I believe, out of that relationship than Israel does. We give them some money every year. It's a very small amount of money in terms of our GDP. It's a rounding error. It's like almost nothing. And for that, we get the intelligence. I mean, think about it. The Mossad just saved President Trump's life, possibly, by getting the information, by doing the work, putting the human intelligence assets on the ground inside Tehran and making it so that they could gather that information and pass it on in time to save President Trump from getting blown up in Air Force One. So that's the outgrowth of the aid that we give to Israel. Why would we cut that? Why would we turn that off? I think that we should not only continue to support Israel every way we can, but we should take the handcuffs off Israel and say, you guys know this region. It's your home. You do what's necessary, and we will back you up 100%. That would be me if I was the president.
Now, you recently reported on the extraordinary mass crossing from Morocco into the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. Was it spontaneous? Was it driven by criminal networks, deliberately facilitated by Morocco? Some people say Israel was involved, of course. What did the headlines miss about that?
Well, there's always been the push factor of poor countries in North Africa looking across that fence and saying, man, if we could just get over there, or it'd be like winning the lottery. But in this case, what changed was the pull factor. And that is the Spanish government, which has taken a hard left turn of late, literally passing laws that said that anyone who makes it into our country will be eligible for all of the social welfare benefits as the same as a Spanish citizen, which means they can get housing, they can get food, they can get medical care, they can get education for free. And that's stuff that you can't get for free in Algeria or even Morocco for that matter. So when they saw the opportunity and were able to get the gates open, they just flooded in their tens of thousands. But that's a problem that's been going on for a long, long time. And I've been there to report on it, and it was just as bad when I was there before. So Morocco, once in a while, will weaponize that dynamic against Europe. They get upset at Europe for something. They say, fine, we're just going to open the gates and let as many people through as want to come. So that's, when I was there, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, they had just had incident like that where 10,000 people were allowed into Ceuta on the same day. And, once they get there, then the people don't know what to do with them because they don't have the resources to manage that many people, but they can't kick them out either because of the laws passed by the Spanish government. Now, that said, this crisis, the president of Spain sent troops down there and took a very Trumpian approach, actually, of shutting off that border and stopping those people from coming across. Now, I don't know that they were evicting the people or deporting them back into Morocco, but they were definitely using force to stop the flow, which I don't know how that plays with this guy being such a leftist that, now he's using the same tactics that Trump already proved works to close the border.
Now, you recently did a piece on suffering in Gaza, the starvation in Gaza. Were journalists and international organizations too quick to accuse Israel of deliberate starvation? And how much does Hamas interfering with aid have to do with it?
I don't know if it really means that they were too quick to believe the stuff that they were being given. The real issue here is that many of these media outlets already had decided what they were going to report before they got to see anything on the ground at all. Before they got any information, they were going to report something that was negative toward Israel. And this has been going on for decades. So it's not a surprise to see that they would gladly lap up whatever the Gaza Health Ministry was putting out and blindly repeat it to their viewers because it followed their narrative. It's what they wanted. So, yeah. Now, as far as Hamas taking the aid, I mean, that just shows they're still in control. And I think that means that Israel probably needs to go back to fighting. And the problem with that is the people in Gaza are being used as human shields, as always. And so there's no possible way for, getting Hamas out of Gaza without getting the Palestinian people out of Gaza is kind of like if you mixed margarine and butter together and then tried to separate them again. It's just, they're one and the same at that. And Hamas still enjoys pretty high popularity in the parts of Gaza that they control. Mostly, and I've said this many times, when your worldview revolves around who you hate, as it does in Gaza, you're not going to have nice things. It's going to be a bad life for you. And the difference we see with the Israelis is that their defense of their country is not focused on who they hate because they're equal opportunity. Anybody who threatens them is going to get slapped, but it's centered around who they love. It's because they love the people behind them, not hate the people in front of them.
It seems like Israel is trying to get Hamas and Hezbollah to give up their weapons. Do you think any of these terrorist organizations are going to give up their weapons? And what would have to happen for the next step if they don't give up their weapons?
Voluntarily. Not voluntarily. They won't give them up. I mean, they've given up governance of Gaza to that technocratic committee, but that was a bonus for Hamas. They never wanted to have to worry about getting the trash picked up and the internet staying on. All they want to do is have the military control over Gaza and then use it as a base to attack Israel. So that hasn't changed. And Hamas still has plenty of fighters. They still have plenty of weapons. They maybe don't have as many as they did before, but they'd still have enough to be a threat, and they are not going to put down those weapons unless they are forced to do so.
Now, apparently there is a weapons production crisis. American precision missiles and air defense interceptors are reportedly running low. Do you think that Ukraine is paying the price for this Iran war? And how many wars can the United States realistically sustain at once?
Well, I think we're seeing that the United States military is not quite as capable as we would like it to be. And that's not President Trump's fault. That's the previous administrations who underfunded the military to the point where, now we have to build it back up. When it comes to the munitions stocks being low and that sort of thing, we have plenty of munitions to prosecute a war. We just maybe don't have the types of munitions that we would prefer to have to prosecute the war, because I think in many ways the U.S. military has become very risk averse, and if they have a choice between firing a missile at a missile that costs $40 million at a target, or flying and dropping maybe a $10,000 bomb on that same thing, well, they're going to go with the missile every time because they're so risk averse. They don't want to risk that. The political cost of losing a U.S. troop is so high that it has changed the whole dynamic in the military, and it's led to this, I hate to call it that, but I call it institutional cowardice in the military, where they're just not willing to put U.S. troops at risk, even though U.S. troops are volunteering. I mean, I guarantee you the troops that are floating around in the middle of the Gulf of Oman right now, those Marines would love nothing more than to be given a mission to go take Karg Island or anything. Just let me go do what I signed up to do, and don't leave me out here like a prop, as a deterrent or something. That is the worst use of American troops. And I know there are people that would disagree, but I was in the military. I felt that way when I was in the military, when there were times when we were given a mission, to a real world mission to go do, and then that mission was turned off at the last minute for political reasons. We were upset. We were mad. And so I mean, Pete Hegseth is doing his best to turn around the culture of the military, but over the last, let's say 15, 20 years, it has gotten to the point where they're not willing to put U.S. troops at risk for almost anything. And that is a problem because you can't win wars if you're not willing to put your troops at risk. That's just all there is to it.
I want to ask you a final question. I know we're not close to any agreement with Iran, but if Washington signs an agreement that Israel considers dangerous, do you think Israel has the right to attack Iran again without American approval?
More than the right, I think they have the duty to do so, the duty to their own people. I mean, look, Israel should, if I was Prime Minister Netanyahu's advisor, I would say, look, Israel should say to the United States, we love working with you. We want to work with you. We want to support you and what you're doing here, and we want you to support us. We want to continue this great relationship we have. But at the end of the day, we're going to do what's best for Israel, whether or not you like it. And if that leads to you pulling your aid from us, then we'll just have to deal with that. But we are not going to allow ourselves to be sandbagged in order to improve President Trump's chances of the GOP winning the next election or anything. I mean, that would be I think the most reasonable thing to say. And a reasonable president would say, totally understand it. You do what you got to do, and we'll help you where we can. And if the politically it's too expensive for us, we won't be able to do that, but we'll still support your right to defend yourselves however you see fit.
Chuck, I want to thank you for your time. How can people find you, find your channel, and everything that you publish?
Well, on YouTube, my show is called The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton, and I do a daily live broadcast doing commentary like this. Usually I try to do it from the places where the war is happening. I've been home for a couple of months taking a break, but we're about to go back on the road actually tomorrow, and probably won't be back in my own bed for a matter of months. So we'll be bringing people on the ground truth from war zones around the planet. And then they can go to chuckholton.com. There's a lot of extra content there. There's some of my documentaries, my books that I've written, and those are available on that site. So they can go find me there.
Amazing. Thank you again, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Hey, my pleasure. We'll see you.